Y'all
All right. Welcome to the NPC Sports podcast. My name is Ben, and I'm joined once again by our NPCs, our non player characters from the world of Boston sports media. As Once again, my name is Ben Watanabe. I am a formerly of Nesson. Now I am working for an illustrious, everything's illustrious, right? Uh, WTF Sports and molder of young minds in colleges. Folks, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Dakota Randall, also formerly of Nesson and of Pro Football Network. Well, Pro Football and Sports Network. They recently rebranded, I guess. Um, and now I also am on the WTF Sports train, publishing baseball and football stories for Newsweek and Sports Illustrated, and a full-time applier to jobs.
Wow. I am Logan Mullen. I also am formerly of Nesson, but have since left for Odyssey and remained at Odyssey. So I am an editor there right now. I do little in the way of molding young minds, but just grinding away.
You have a tremendous sitcom drop, backdrop there with like the stairs. It gives me kind of
Well,
like a everybody loves Raymond vibe.
yeah, it does kind of look like that, doesn't it? Don't insult it too much, because transforming this room into a livable space when my wife got pregnant was like my passion project. This was my version of nesting. So I worked very hard to make this space kind of look like the sitcom backdrop you see today.
It looks terrible too. Like I don't. I'm just being honest. It doesn't look like a good
It's
space.
it's a little disorganized. It's a
It's not that.
concrete
It's just boring.
basement.
There's all muted grays. There's nothing fun going on. I'm just saying, as far as man caves go, it's pretty bad.
Thanks. I mean, I was just trying to, create a child-free space for
Yeah.
myself where I could gather my thoughts and get some work done. But I'm sorry that the aesthetics don't live up to what you would like for them to be, Dakota.
While we're on this topic, I just wanted to say, in my old age, I've slowly started to embrace sitcoms a little bit more. Part of that is because all my mother-in-law does is watch Big Bang Theory, and when I say all she does,
Oof.
I literally mean the only thing she does is use my best friend's Max account to watch Big Bang Theory, and I've been sucked into some of the viewings, and I gotta say it's pretty funny. I like Big Bang
Of all
Theory.
the sitcoms you
It's a
could
good.
pluck,
It's pretty
a,
funny.
a
It's funny that there's like a layer like for nerds to appreciate, and then also a layer for like boomers that have no idea what string theory is can still find a bunch of humor. But to that end, I thought the other day they should do a spiritual sequel to The Big Bang Theory and call it Simulation Theory. Maybe bring back the OG cast or their kids or something, and just call it the Simulation
they
Theory.
should
I like how you
create a
settled.
show called like Young. They should create a show called like Young Sheldon or something, where it's like a prequel. Maybe something like that.
I like how you settled boomers with not understanding what string theory is. Like that's a generational thing, and not just like a. Uh, it,
It's not social media. String theory predated boomers too.
these
Well,
these
it's like I
boomers
was
that don't understand string theory. I don't know. I
I was
don't. I
watching
don't
it
think
the
most
other
people
day.
from most generations know what the heck string theory is.
I guess there are better
Do you know what
examples.
string theory is?
I don't
I
know
was
what string theory is.
I couldn't. I mean, if I tried to explain it, I'd sound stupid. But I understand the loose concept, and just I understand like why it's a major
So
part of.
Oh,
no.
if he was trying to dumb it down for us, Logan, he would sound
Yeah.
stupid. But
If
yeah,
he's trying
it
to
would.
put it in lay terms for us,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
right.
He knows
Well,
what
no,
it is,
the
but
point
but
is,
he understands. But if he had to explain it to us, he couldn't
no,
really do that. Yeah.
I don't understand what it is. What I do know is that for a long time, a lot of leading scientists fell in love with string theory and tried to prove it, and then it's been clear for a long time that it's not provable, but they follow it like a cult. And then so there was a segment in the show where they were just referencing that split, and I thought that was
So
funny. But
Leading
she was just
scientists who have
laughing at
appeared
the
on
general
Rogan.
comedy of it.
I'm assuming that that's the.
oh
I'm just saying,
boy.
I like Big
I
Bang.
also would like to reflect that you didn't give any insight on what string theory is actually said to be, just that there are disputes about whether it's provable or not.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I just don't think
Like,
there's
if someone didn't know what
proven
string
engineering.
theory was, they're no closer to understanding what it might or even might not be that after that explanation that you gave, the dumbed
It's just
down explanation.
it's not that complicated. It's just that the universe, rather than being a series of infinitely small atoms and quarks and other particles and bosons is actually a series of imperceptible tiny strings in which all life exists and repeats at various points in other dimensions. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that, Logan. So.
I don't know how to segue from that to what we were actually going to talk about today.
You just have to do a hard pivot.
Yeah,
There's
just
no
a hard
segue.
pivot to the in-season tournaments, to the NBA Cup and the 12 worlds,
The Four Nations.
Four Nations, Infinite Worlds. There you go. That's your segue.
The 2025 Four Nations face-off.
The Infinite Realities face-off. So, listen, this was put forth by our board here of topics to discuss. The in-season tournaments. The title I came up with on the screen here is "Do in-season tournaments cheapen the product?" Which is, I think, where we were going with the kind of communication we were doing. But kind of as a jumping off point, the Four Nations face-off is going on. I don't care. I don't know how many people care. We also have the NBA Cup, which has become a thing now. And again, I don't care. I know that that's a terrible kind of setting the stage for a talking point. But I think it is kind of the basis of these in-season tournaments. Like, we're fairly hardcore sports observers, if not fans. And if I don't care, and I don't know about your guys' level of interest, what does this do for the product?
Yeah, I don't think it cheapens it. Go ahead, Dakota.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting because this type of stuff is probably at the end of the day only truly for hardcore fans, because most casual sports fans, if they're going to tune into anything like this, there need to be stakes. Which is, I think, maybe the problem that like a lot of All-Star games, especially the Major League Baseball All-Star game, has run into, is that it was maybe never more interesting than when it was for the World Series home field advantage, but that was also ultimately the wrong thing for it to be. And with these types of things, there's not really much at stake except for bragging rights and just the pure enjoyment of the sport. And ultimately, especially in today's sort of low attention span society, that's really the only people that are going to buy into it for those reasons are hardcore viewers of the sport. And so, whether or not I enjoy it or not, I just question the longevity of these kind of things, because I doubt their ability to capture casual fans, which at the end of the day, it's a business and that's what they have to do.
I'm curious if they do continue to fail to capture casual fans, like if they'll keep doing it, because my thing is, I don't think it's a waste of time, and I don't think it's a cheapening of the product. Like, I can, think about how much the NBA TV ratings decline gets discussed. Like, you can't knock the NBA for trying to find something to pull other people in when all we say is that the regular season's too long and no one cares about the regular season. That said, I have no idea who cares about the NBA in-season tournament, for example. Like, I know teams didn't the Lakers like hang a banner for winning it or something? All I feel like I saw about was a team got mocked for actually celebrating they won the in-season tournament. And it's like, my thing is like, it's just a completely neutral thing. It's like, maybe there's a person out there who like the in-season tournament is appointment viewing for them. Like, I guess if you're, maybe it pulls in like a Hawks fan in a way that it wouldn't for like, okay, your team probably isn't that good. Your team certainly won't win a title. Like, maybe you can run into a decent enough stretch where you can get like something to show for it. Kind of like, I'm sure they're modeling this after like the FA Cup in England and tournaments like that, like domestic tournaments. But as it relates to the Four Nations face-off TM, I think that, if ever there's a sport that it might take hold for, maybe it's hockey, especially because fans for so long were pissed about NHL players not being able to go to the Olympics, that, there does seem to be genuine interest among the top NHL players in taking part in this tournament. So like, that's worth something. whether people will actually watch it, I don't know. But like I think for hockey diehards, like there are lots of people who watch the World Juniors and things like that. Like that market is already there for something like this. So I would think you're probably going to pull in some more NHL fans that way. So to me, I think taking the international component kind of broadens it in a way that the NBA version does not rather. But I don't know if that's enough to make like a material difference in viewership where this becomes some massive trend or much awaited tournament
I think the main issue with the Four Nations tournament, at least for me, is it's similar to what the issue had been with the Olympics with the best players not going, and it's that it's like Russia's not in this tournament, right? Isn't it just it's Sweden, Finland, Canada, and the U.S., right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's again, it doesn't mean it's not going to be great hockey and the best talent will win, but it's just one of the very best talent pools is not represented, so it's hard to buy in from the outset because it's almost like maybe I won't put an asterisk on it, but a lot of people will be like, "Wow, it was only 4 nations, so what does that really mean?" I just wonder if that's maybe part of what would turn people away until it becomes a bigger field. And one note on the NBA in-season tournament, I probably shouldn't even admit this, but the last time I cared about it is when I thought like home court was on the line. I thought like when the first season that it was going on, I was watching it, and I think there was a game where the Celtics needed to win, or however the math needed to work for the Celtics to stay in, and I just like kind of being stupid thought that like if they won, they could still get home field or home court advantage, just even if they didn't get the number one seed. And then I realized that wasn't what it was, and it was just for them to get more money. And I haven't watched any sort of game related to the NBA in-season tournament since, because I can't fathom why you'd care. Like, why would you watch just knowing that what's on the line is these guys getting like $500,000? I can't fathom like why you'd be interested in it other than just watching more basketball. I don't know. It's weird. I do like the dynamic of teams intentionally running up the score. Like it makes for an interesting element that you don't normally get. But other than that, I don't find much value in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I agree with you guys on the longevity of it, or the questionable longevity, because the two kind of comparisons that I can think of for it was an All-Star game, which you mentioned, and the other thing I kind of think was like a mini tournament is like things like the Maui Invitational, and those sorts of things that college hoops has. But the two problems I think with that are all-star games are inherently for casual fans, right? And I really kind of had this realization the last couple of years where like my daughter, who is getting into pro sports, she really wants to watch the all-star games because it's where she can watch one game and get to know everybody that's important. So she can be like, oh, I didn't know that guy was on such and such team. Like, Julio Rodriguez was a perfect example. Like when he was, in the All-Star game last year or whenever the last time he was healthy, that's a player that like you never see as a kid on the East Coast. But the problem from the reason why the NBA Cup and all that doesn't really compare to that though is because an All-Star game is one-stop shop. Like if you're a casual fan, I just need to log in one time, see one game, and I know what's going on. The NBA Cup is convoluted with the point differentials and all that kind of stuff that like if you're a casual fan and you're just trying to tune in to find this thing, it's a lot more gatekeepy than just a regular season game at that same time of year would be, and that stuff. And then on the absolute other end of the spectrum, like if you're a hardcore fan, like historically the reason that those sort of like invitational college basketball in season preseason tournaments have drawn a lot of attention is because as a Temple fan, I usually can't watch every game, and so when your team is involved in those kind of like winter tournaments where every game is on ESPN2 or something like that, as a hardcore fan, you really want that. In the NBA, NHL, that doesn't exist. Like if you're a hardcore fan of the Florida Panthers and you live in Wisconsin, you get the NHL package and you can watch every game anyway. So like there's no additional benefit to having a whether it would be like an in-season, equivalent of the NHL Cup or a Four Nations face-off where you get to see all your favorite players. Like you can already watch as much hockey as you want. The World Juniors, like you mentioned. So it's like, okay, well, this is just an additional thing that I already get of something that I already get.
So I will say I think that's a little different for like the Four Nations thing, because it's like, when else are you going to see you might see Crosby and Marchand on a line together. Like the last time we saw that was 2016, like something like that. Like it's been that long. Um, so I do think that's where it's like it's along the lines of an all-star game, but that's the type of reason I could see it pulling some people, especially because like the best players by and large are going. And because it's international, it mixes things up a little bit. I felt kind of the same way about the last iteration of the World Baseball Classic. Like, didn't necessarily get the absolute best players, like, could have done without Lance Lynn on Team USA and so on. But, I think Tim Anderson was the starting shortstop on the team, but it was still compelling enough. And, everyone for a while talked about the Trout versus Otani thing for the final at bat. Like, I found that to be a genuinely compelling tournament. I'm also more of a baseball person, but I think that once it seemed like the players started taking it seriously, fans started taking it a little bit more seriously. So yeah, the NBA, I don't see anything additive to that. But Four Nations, the World Baseball Classic, like the All-Star game, you can kind of see the different layers there where it might pull someone in who otherwise wouldn't access it or watch it or whatever.
That's a good point, because once you get like the other cultures in, to me, the reason I love the World Baseball Classic is that you see the clash of like different, like you got Cuba where it's all just guys trying to mash home runs. You've got like Taiwan and Japan where it's all everyone's trying to just get to 3-2 and then smack a Texas leaguer. So I agree with that. And that's the challenge with like an NBA in-season tournament is you're just watching the same teams jack threes as usual.
And seeing players that either you haven't seen in a while, have never seen, or about to see, like watching Ilya Kovalchuk in the Olympics when he was playing over in Russia was really cool because you were reminded how great he was. Watching Masataka Yoshida in that World Baseball Classic before he played his first games for the Red Sox was an interesting preview.
And we thought he might actually be good.
Yeah, right.
Jury's still out there. I haven't given up.
I think, to your point, though, Ben, about the point differential stuff, I think the U.S. market has spoken, especially when it comes to their interest in soccer, that once you introduce the phrase the aggregate, they tune out. As soon as the aggregate comes into play, people stop caring. And my other note on this is I just want to give a shout out to the Big League Challenge. I think that deserves a place on the podium for best in-season, preseason, gimmick tournament things, whatever you want to call it, whatever your qualifiers are. I have a fondness for Big League Challenge, which was 2000 and 2001. I just remember Nomar competing, and I don't know. I liked the Big League Challenge. I still have a bobblehead for Nomar Nomar in his Big League Challenge jersey. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. Come on, Big League Challenge 2000, 2001. It took place like right before or in the first week of spring training when they would have like a hitting tournament and like including a home run derby, and it ran in 2000 to 2001. You had like Rafi Palmeiro, I think, won it one year, and they wore like the blue jerseys, and it took place down in the spring venues. Don't remember that?
Do you remember this, Logan?
I don't remember this. No, I don't. If you're talking about a one-off event in spring training 25 years ago, no, I'm having a tough time pulling that.
Yeah.
I'm not
right,
denying that it happened.
Right,
I'm just denying that this automatically belongs in the conversation with the best like variations.
2000, 2001, I was like literally staying up to watch Baseball Tonight every single night, and like I don't recall this at all. It sounds like it would have been a lot of fun.
I'm reading a story. Wow, it's like the old ESPN.com from Sunday, February 11th in 2000, and it took place in Las Vegas. Jose Canseco warmed up for the start of spring training with some mammoth shots Sunday to beat Rafael Palmeiro in the finals of the 2000 Big League Challenge home run hitting contest. Chipper Jones was in it too, so was Andrew Jones. Yeah, Big League Challenge was sweet. And
those four guys could probably do that now and put it on DAZN. You know what I mean? Like that's what that has the feelings of now.
Yeah.
Well,
Fubo Sports Network.
I do not recall that from spring training of 2001 or whatever it was.
I'll
But
send you some videos after this.
I do recall spring training pitchers and catchers reporting in 2025 because that's happening right now. The Cardinals, I think, were the first to report. Of course, obviously they are. Their fans probably take pride in that somehow, that they're the first group of players to get to work down in sunny Florida. We've touched a little bit on the Red Sox before with their spring training, their personnel moves and or lack thereof. I guess I'll just put a very simple question to each of you. What are you watching for as this spring training begins to get off the ground?
I want to know what they're going to do with the rotation because they got a lot of arms. And I feel like for so long, they've had a situation where they've had like three competent starters at any one time. And then the fourth starter is just a bulk innings guy. And then it's a bullpen game. So it's like after 3 years of doing that, don't you want to just do a 6-man rotation since you presumably have at least 6 competent arms? I mean, that's squeezing out like Patrick Sandoval. But I'm very curious to see how they manage the rotation because to me, it's like just stretch it out, like just use as many guys as possible. It works for the Dodgers. I'm worried that they're going to get a little cute, and it's like don't upend anyone's development track. Don't start doing the bullpen game thing. Like you finally have a solid stable of 6 rotation arms. Just use them all. Use a 6-man rotation, please. That's my number one thing.
Yeah, for me, it's uh, which of the top 2 prospects makes the opening day roster. If either of them do, I want to see, like, there's been so much buzz about Christian Campbell. Does he go out and truly earn a spot on the opening day roster as the starting second baseman, or is he just all right and starts the year in AAA and we get Vaughn Grissom? And then what happens if Vaughn Grissom plays well, right? But or is it Roman Anthony who plays? And this, I mean, it could totally happen that he plays so well that you have to put him on the roster. I mean, that's what Rafaela did last year, right? And if that happens, what's the domino effect? Because I think probably the best version of the Red Sox is to have sit down Rafaela as like a super utility guy, like a Kike Hernandez, not as an everyday player. And now, if Roman Anthony makes the team, then you foreseeably have Roman Anthony, Willie Abreu, and Jaron Duran as your outfielders, and then Rafaela as your super utility. And I just think that makes the Red Sox much better. But yeah, just which one of those 2 guys, if either earn a spot on the roster, and then also just who emerges as the closer. I think people are sort of assuming it's going to be Aroldis Chapman or Liam Hendricks, and maybe that's the case. But I think there are a lot of guys who, they could push for that spot, whether it's Luis Guerrero, Justin Slayton, maybe even Garrett Whitlock, health depending. I think Luis Guerrero is the most interesting one, given that he was developed as a closer and showed well in his limited opportunities last year. I just think that would be big for them if someone other than Hendricks and Chapman emerges as a viable closer to start the season, because then the bullpen can slot into place in guys in much better roles instead of having to play some guys in higher leverage innings when they shouldn't. So those are the 2 spots for me.
You see Vaughn Grissom put on 20 pounds.
Everyone always puts on 20 pounds of muscle. Yeah.
Yeah, that 20 pounds that really could go either way, but that's the big Vaughn Grissom talker.
Let's see, but he's an interesting piece because it's like I think they have like 5 years of team control left, and so like
yeah,
again, we talked on the last episode about like certain variables that go your way. What if Vaughn Grissom, and I mean again, you traded Chris Sale for him. What if Vaughn Grissom shows the ability to be an everyday player or close to it? Then do you find a role for him? Do you take at bats away from him by making him a platoon guy or a utility guy? Do you search for a trade? Because again, there's a lot of bodies there, and he's just an interesting player. So
I haven't closed the door on him being useful. I do think it's telling that the Braves were content to gamble longer term with a otherwise journeyman in Orlando Arcia than ride things out with Vaughn Grissom. So that would be one kind of cause for concern. But at the same time, like, that does probably mean it was a good thing if Vaughn Grissom is your starting second baseman on opening day, because it means he bounced back well enough. Like last year was a weird injury year for him, so we don't really know the deal. The one thing for me though is I probably would have preferred if they had a more like a veteran 4A kind of guy to challenge him instead of Christian Campbell or David Hamilton, because like who knows how, if Christian Campbell, like Ben and I expressed trepidation about him last time because he was such a fast riser. That's like, okay, what if he really can't push Grissom that much and he's your starting second baseman? Like that suddenly kind of becomes a bit of a hole. Um, Unless he really has just like a monster spring, because who's he going up against? Like you should be able to beat David Hamilton, a useful player, but should be coming off the bench. Same thing with Romy Gonzalez. It's like, I guess the one argument would be Rafaela. Like if he gets an extended look at second base, that would be justifiable. But even still, like Vaughn Grissom could be your starting second baseman on opening day and have really not proved himself with a monster spring. It could just be a relative dearth of options.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think the talent there is enough where somebody is gonna play well. Like Christian Campbell, again, we're talking about
Sure.
a top 5 prospect. Vaughn Grissom, I think the questions are, how much can he impact the ball? Like, is he gonna drive the ball? Is he gonna get home runs, or is he really just gonna, be a singles hitter? Or in David Hamilton, I think we know the floor there. So I think whoever they put there, whether they have to sort of rotate guys or whatever, I think they'll be fine there. I don't really foresee any sort of scenario where it's just the black hole that it's been in recent seasons. But the ceiling is a question because just who knows, right? If Christian Campbell is that good out of the gate, we still have no idea what Vaughn Grissom's ceiling is. So I think the floor I'm fine with, but I have no idea. I have no idea how good any of those guys can really be this season anyway.
Yeah, for me, it's I think I feel really good about the pitching staff, especially in comparison to the lineup. But even so, the two guys that I am most interested to see what they come out with, because I think that they will determine whether it's a good pitching staff or like a really, really effective pitching staff, are Walker Buehler and Liam Hendricks. Hendricks, because I might be mistaken, but like I don't recall him having a decline. For me, it was he was nasty, he got hurt, and now he's coming back. And so for me, like that's really exciting because there's no sign, there's no reason besides the injury to believe that he won't be sick again. And for Walker Buehler, Walker Buehler had a rough 2024. He really saved his reputation in the postseason. But he's also not super old. Like it's not like he's like a Rich Hill that you're like coming in and hoping that he can.
Yeah, he broke in young.
Yeah, and so if Walker Buehler can be anything as effective as he was, a couple of years ago, that's when you're talking about having a rotation that's like not just has some strength at the top, but like one that's really, really deep. Because if you have Hendricks is obviously strong, I'm counting on Aroldis Chapman to be effective in whatever role he's in, because again, like he is not as nasty as he used to be, but he has continually been effective as a back end of the bullpen guy. So that's why, Hendricks and Buehler I'm interested to see, because if all of a sudden, if those two are really, really effective, some of the uncertainty with the lineup and the infield and that sort of thing, it becomes navigable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the other player I'd throw into that I think, again, we talk about things that could go either way. I mean, Brian Bayo, this is kind of a make it or break it year for him, just in terms of really realizing what he is. He's someone who a lot of unfair expectations were put on. Like, you started getting these Pedro comparisons just because of the windup, and where he's from. But, if you followed him throughout the minors, he was never billed as a future ace or even really a number 2. It was like high end number 3 at his max, maybe low end 2 on a good day. And last year he was more a decent 5, right? But the talent is certainly there for him to be a mid-rotation starter. And if he figures that out this year with the other two guys you're talking about, and Buehler and Crochet, And if Tanner Houck even is just an approximation of what he was last season, all of a sudden you're talking about a very good rotation. So I think, Bayo is a huge X factor for them.
On the Bueller thing too, the point we kind of made this last week talking about Chris Sale, but first normal off season, he didn't have one after because he got the surgery in 2023, right? He missed all 2023. Then he didn't debut until May in 2024. So weird off seasons the last two. So now he's coming off of a normal one, or he will be going through a normal one. That is generally when you start to see the Tommy John guys start to take off again, if they're ever going to. And again, wild cards, Giolito. Like, I know he was terrible in 2023 before he ended up with the Red Sox and bounced around a bit, but still, that's someone who, if you take the injury year out of it, really isn't that far removed from being a useful enough back of the rotation guy. And that's my thing is, like, I don't need Lucas Giolito to be a number 2 again. Like, he can be a number 5. If you're going with a 6-man rotation, you can live with that because you're not trotting out a guy who'll make 3 big league appearances in his life or reliever as your starter. So it's like, you can live with that. If you get 4 or 5 competent innings out of Lucas Giolito most of the time, like, you're probably going to take that for this year. As it relates to the bullpen, I would, first of all, I want to see Chapman anywhere near the 9th inning. I would rather it be Hendricks or Slayton. I think Slayton is probably the young arm. Like, your point's well taken about how Guerrero is brought up, but Slayton seems like the guy who has the makeup and the pitch mix to be a closer long term, or be a useful arm like that long term. I thought he was probably their best reliever last year in the stretches where he was healthy. So I think if he becomes like your 8th inning guy, if he's your bridge to Hendricks, I think that's probably a good role for him. And then you use Chapman a little bit more situationally or in the 7th. But I don't want Aroldis Chapman getting save opportunities.
Yeah, the only bummer about this rotation, it's not a bad thing. It's just they're at least on paper they're so deep that it might halt or impede some of the development of some of the intriguing guys they have in the minors. I mean, I know they're not sexy names, but Quinn Priester is an interesting player. Yeah. I mean, he's someone who it wasn't long ago that he was highly regarded prospect for the Pirates, and not every guy comes. Look, we're seeing it right now with Brian Bayo, right? Like he hasn't quite rounded into form yet. He's kind of figuring it out, and Quinn Priester's kind of in that mold too, where he still has a lot of talent. And the Red Sox traded Nick York, and they were kind of selling high because he was having a good season, and they brought him in. And at least from everything that I read, part of the thing with Quinn Priester is they've sort of overhauled his windup and his pitch mix and everything. They're kind of doing the full Andrew Bailey treatment. And if that clicks, I mean, you don't trade someone like Nick York, who wasn't a perfect prospect, but he was a top 10 prospect. You don't trade someone like that for a starter and just on a flyer, and maybe he can start, maybe he can. I mean, they clearly believe in Quinn Priester to some degree. But the question is, like, is he even going to get opportunities this season, or is he going to be in the minors the whole time? And that's, similar case with Richard Fitz, who showed well at the end of last season. Then I look at someone like Hunter Dobbins, who not many people are talking about, but, most prospect rankings, he's ahead of Richard Fitz. And he's the highest ranked pitcher on most prospect rankings for the Red Sox, other than Luis Perales. And he's been in Worcester, like he's knocking on the door of being ready, but is he going to get an opportunity this season with the depth of the rotation? Probably not. And then you get into the question of, do you put these guys in the bullpen for a while until a spot opens up? Again, it's a good problem to have, but it just might be that, we're not going to get a look at some of these younger pitchers for a while.
Cool. Anything to add on the Red Sox side? Your rebuttal, Logan?
Oh, not much of a rebuttal there. I'm largely in agreement.
Yeah. How about, I'll throw a question out real quick. Who, other than the top guys, Anthony, Meyer, and Campbell, I don't know how in the weeds you guys are on the prospects, but is there anyone in particular that you're the most interested in following or hearing about throughout spring training?
If Priester counts, it probably would have been Priester. I thought they should have given him more of a look last year, but like the Pirates are a pitching factory. They don't re-sign any of them, but they sure can pump out pitchers. So a guy who is that regarded in their system, once the season was lost last year, I thought they should have taken a really good look at him. But that's someone that, like, Walker Bueller, if he has a good year, he's probably gone. If Giolito has a good year, he's probably gone. And then you're right back to where you were before. So it's like, there's still a level of, you need to know what your in-house options are. Like, you can pretty much set your watch with how Bayo and Crawford, but you also, like, you're not going to try and make Whitlock a starter anymore. They've learned at that point. So it's like, well, who are your rotation depth options there? So that's someone who I really think they need to take a good look for.
No, outside of, I mean, when you say like who are the top guys, there's like 6 or 7 players, prospects that I think Red Sox and Red Sox fans are pretending like are top guys. Honestly, the guy who, he's not a prospect, but I am kind of watching as like a young player is Bayo. Because one thing I've been surprised at is if once you get outside of like the Red Sox echo chamber, the way that Bayo is considered on like a national league wide scale is nowhere near where like the Red Sox
Tell
circle,
you he is.
yeah, presents him as. Like they present him as like,
Right.
oh, this guy's a future ace. This guy's like he's the next Pedro, as you mentioned. And it was really interesting because like I was reading a lot of like preseason expectations, and the one that I read, I believe it was in The Athletic and somewhere else, they had the rotation, and both of them had him fighting for a spot in the rotation, like as like a 4th or a 5th. And I just thought that was very interesting because, again, like if you watch the games here, you're given the impression that this guy is like, oh, he's a stud, this guy. And so that's why I'm interested to watch him, like from a, I know that you were asking more from like the prospect standpoint, who are you not watching, but I'm thinking more from like the big league standpoint, a guy who is not up there, even though if you only watch the Red Sox broadcasts, you think that he's up there, but for the most part, he's not considered up there.
Yeah, definitely. I would say he's got to be automatic for the rotation, but I will say I don't think it would take much this year for Alex Cora to pull him and try somebody else given the depth that they have. My choice is gonna go in the weeds a little bit. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Conrad Kaysen rather. He was an 8th round pick last year, so this is his first year.
So really knocking on the door to the big leagues.
No, listen, hold on. His name's Conrad Kaysen. He was an 8th round pick last year. He's 16th on Sox Prospect, which is a pretty good debut spot for an 8th round pick. He's a two-way guy, so he's a pitcher and he's a shortstop.
Oh.
And that he is going to play both. They've said it. He said it. They're going to have him do both. So I just think that's interesting. Like, what does he look like in spring training? What is some of the buzz that comes out from scouts? Does he show enough to maybe keep going with that into the season, or is it like no? He's one or the other. Just an interesting wild card guy that I'm going to follow. If he was down to like ranked in the low 30s or 40s, I wouldn't really care. But the fact that he's as high as 16, ahead of Luis Guerrero and a lot of these other guys, it's an interesting player. I'm just curious to see how he does in his first spring training.
Where did you say he was drafted out of, or did you know?
I think out of high school. Let me see real quick. So he's 18. So he was drafted out of high school. He's from Georgia. So I'll just quickly read the summation on a scouting spot on Sox Prospects. High risk, high reward player who will be developed initially at least as a two-way player. Most scouts prefer him on the mound, but impressed at the plate and in the field, especially at the draft combine. Has standout athleticism in either role and strong loose arm. On the mound has a 3-pitch mix with good velocity, solid approach at the plate, developing power, profiles to play up the middle defensively. So again, like just interesting. Might by the end of the year be a nothing prospect, but at least for now, he's kind of interesting.
Know the terminology, like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. To me, if you're getting drafted out of high school, where like high school pitchers are such a wild card in the first place, like highly ranked high school pitchers, let alone lower tier ones, that if you are a two-way player who got drafted out of high school, why don't you just go ahead and play a fielding position?
Well,
Because
to your point,
there's zero chance that guy's going to end up as a pitcher, I feel
well,
like.
and listen, the interesting,
Knowing nothing about him, of course, but
there,
just
the
tea
thing
leaves.
is, in the Red Sox front office or in the scouting department, I believe there are a lot of holdovers from the Epstein Charrington years, and so for them, I wonder if a cautionary tale will be Trey Ball. If you remember Trey Ball, who was he
Yeah.
third or fifth
He
overall?
was a
pick?
first rounder, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was like fifth overall, and he
Yeah.
was out of high school as a two-way player, and they made the call right away to have him be a left-handed pitcher. And of course, he was terrible, right? And then at the very end of his,
Yeah.
at the very end, when as a desperation move, he started to try and play the field and hit again, and he couldn't pick it up anymore. So maybe that's a again, a cautionary tale to pick a lane. It's fun to dream about the two-way stuff with Ohtani and everything, but if you have convictions one way or the other, maybe decide early. Or don't. Maybe they should have let Trey Ball try both for longer, to really get a better look at both instead of picking a lane too early. I just think that's really the only other example that the Red Sox have is Trey Ball, and it was the failure. So hopefully they handle this guy a little bit better.
All right, we'll keep an eye on
a lot of Conrad Case and talk.
Yeah, as the Conrad Cason goes marching along with this episode. Listen, the Super Bowl was a couple days ago. As with everything Super Bowl, it's always examined to death. You beat the dead horse, you crack open the dead horse, you do an autopsy, you gut the dead horse, and then you shoot it a few times to really make sure that it's
Stuff
dead.
it.
This isn't a entertainment pod by any stretch of the imagination, but the halftime show seems to be stirring people up on the social medias. Without being someone who's a diehard Super Bowl halftime show connoisseur, I don't know. Maybe someone want to explain to me what the controversy is, or if either of you had a strong take on Mr. Lamar.
Yeah, I'll go. I think this has been one of the more interesting fallouts from a Super Bowl halftime show, and I think three things can be true at the same time. Like, number one, Kendrick Lamar always was kind of a weird choice for a halftime show because he doesn't have many huge singles or major bangers that are instantly recognizable, but he also has never tried or wanted to be that. It's not really who he is as a rapper. And so, like it or not, I mean, that's what people expect from the halftime show these days. Is just the casuals want huge singles that they recognize right away, but he never was that. So it was always kind of a weird choice for me. Number two, if you didn't understand the full context of the last year with Drake and Kendrick, including the Serena stuff, the SZA stuff, all the beef songs, like your enjoyment of the show was going to be limited by default. And so, to that point, number three being, I think there's a fair conversation to be had about whether the Super Bowl is the right setting for an if you know show where, should we really have a Super Bowl halftime show where you need to read a Wikipedia page before or after watching it? I liked it because, listen, ever since the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake mishap, the NFL's played it insanely safe with, a never-ending stream of sanitized, uninteresting, boring pop stars that do nothing for me. And then Kendrick, obviously there was a lot more going on, both in sort of the metaphors going on and the messaging and just him going after Drake. Like, it was interesting. And also just from a music standpoint, someone who, is widely considered one of the greatest rappers of all time, where most of the artists that you get trotted out, they're very, very popular, but from an artistic standpoint, they're maybe not held in that high of a regard. So it was interesting. I enjoyed it because I'd like just something different, but I understand why a lot of people weren't really feeling it because, again, not a lot of instantly recognizable huge songs, which is what people look for in that show.
Yeah, I think I liked it. I think having a strong opinion on a 15-minute halftime show is kind of nonsensical. But the one thing I will give you is he's not known as like a hit maker. So there's not going to be a lot of recognizable top 40 hits. At the same time, the Super Bowl pulls such a wide audience that, like, who the hell could you pick that would satisfy everyone? Not everything needs to be for me. So that's why I don't care. As far as if stuff, it's like, I don't know. I feel like the Drake Kendrick stuff, I'm not as like plugged into that as other people are. It's like, that was a massive like pop culture story. And so, all right, I get that your 60-year-old Facebook friends, Dakota, probably don't really keep up with some of that, but
They're too
there's
busy
still a
trying to
large
figure out string
swath of
theory. Yeah.
yeah, they're still trying to figure out string theory, let alone the Drake and Kendrick beef. So I just like, all right, you have to go look up a Wikipedia stuff. I've actually seen like kind of funny like Instagram reels of young kids having to explain the beef to their parents. Like that's funny to me. It's just I who the hell cares? Turn it off if you don't like it. You know,
Yeah, he's just
as and
he's an
anyone.
interesting. I was
I
gonna
won't
say
get into the people missing the political points too, because that's
oh
just
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, because that's the other thing is it's turned into like everyone trying to make it so much more than it was, and like taking upon them to give you a history lesson or on the behalf of Kendrick try and say what he was getting across. Where like we don't know. Okay, I mean, some of it I think is pretty easy to read into, but I've seen like just dissertations written on it where I'm like, okay, let's cool it a little bit and just appreciate it for what it was. But he's Kendrick is an interesting artist in the sense that like not Like Us was the biggest song of the year, most streamed on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, won all the Grammys, which doesn't mean anything, but and yet most of the people who watched that show probably had never heard it or had any idea what that song was. Whereas I think he's just about just as big as The Weeknd. And then when The Weeknd went on, he did what was it, Blinding by the Lights, where he was going through the room, and most casual adults in America probably had heard that song because of the radio play. And yet there's a whole subculture where like Not Like Us wasn't played on the radio much, but on the internet it was the most played song. And so again, it's kind of a generational divide. But I heard someone try to make the point that you know because Kendrick doesn't have a ton of instantly recognizable hits, he's not good enough to carry a halftime show, or that is somehow sort of a knock on him as an artist. And I've kind of likened him to Tupac in the sense, maybe this is revisionist history, but I don't think there's much debate about over Tupac being one of the greatest rappers of all time. And I think a lot of people would tell you that. And then if you ask them to name 3 Tupac songs, they probably wouldn't be able to. So a lot of people recognize Kendrick's talent, but at the same time, he just doesn't have a lot of immediate singles that people remember off the top of their head or know about. You just sort of respect the talent for what it is, but it just might not lend itself to something like the Super Bowl halftime show.
all I'll say is I
I
watched
think Ben
them
had a
trot.
Tupac rebuttal ready and loaded.
Oh, I'll be quick. All I'll say is they trotted out the corpses of the Who 15 years ago, and it was just a freaking debacle. So maybe we don't need to just placate to the boomers. It's okay if we do like, internet culture as the draw for a change.
My only contrast with Tupac was that you could have never heard a Tupac song before. You listen to a Tupac song and you would understand his references and all that. Like his songs were pretty self-explanatory. And with the Kendrick stuff, I felt it was much more I'm like, what is he talking about? So I think that was just a really quick aside on the Tupac thing.
No, I think
yeah.
that's fair. I think the thing with Kendrick is he's kind of, and not to say he's like Bob Dylan. I'm not going to say he's the Bob Dylan of rap, but in the same sense where there's so much metaphor, perhaps too much going on that like everyone sort of listens to Bob Dylan and recognizes that something great's happening, but it's almost impossible to know what he's talking about. And I think kind of the same thing happens with Kendrick, where you're like something profound and meaningful is being said here, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I guess I would say anyone who was watching that halftime show and was kind of like puzzled and thinking like, what's happening here? I would say welcome to my world, because I feel like every halftime show where they have either a bro country or like an embalmed classic rock person come out, I'm just typically like, what is happening here? The only one that I can remember that I actually like went into not knowing a whole lot and then listened to, I was like, hey, I kind of like that performer is The Weeknd. I came out of that, yeah, I was like, oh, I like his songs. They kind of like have like an 80s sort of, synthesizer sound. But for the most part, I feel like a lot of times it has been a lot of like maybe bro country guys the last or gals the last few years. Maybe I'm just misremembering that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a thing.
Didn't they have like Lady Gaga recently within the last couple of years? Didn't she
But
like jump off the roof or something?
Yeah, last year was Usher. Then 2 years ago it was the ensemble with Dre, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and I forget who it was.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm totally wrong in that then. So yeah, Dre. I mean, Dre's the equivalent of a classic rock guy. I mean, he's 40 years ago was when he rose to fame. I guess one thing that I've felt for a long time, when it comes to sporting events, nothing takes me out of the shared experience of watching a sporting event with other people than when they play music. And I think it's interesting because it's the reason that they usually choose to play the music is that they want to appeal to a broader audience. But similar, when I was in college or even in my 20s, the fastest way for me to know that I was not going to come back to a alcohol establishment was if they played that Journey song.
Don't stop believing.
Yeah, that one.
That's a rule I can get
Wagon
behind.
Wheel.
Yeah, I would be there, and if they would play that Journey song or the I think it's Bon Jovi, Halfway There.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of those where I was like
Living on a Prayer.
Yeah, I was
Living
like
on a
I would
Prayer.
be I'd be sitting there and they'd play that and everybody starts swinging. I'd be like singing and I'd be like, nope, this is the last time I will be here. And I've had that feeling again a couple years ago with the Red Sox when they were playing it was
Dancing
only
on My Own.
No, it was only a Kiss song. And
Mr. Brightside.
the entire stadium started singing along with it. It's a song I had literally never heard before in my life, and they still play it to this day. And I was looking it up, and I got to tell you, they were not really playing whoever that was in the Philly neighborhoods I lived in at that time.
You lost me on that. You hadn't heard Mr. Brightside, and it's at that point 18 years of existence, that one might actually be on you. But
I never heard it in my life, let alone people knowing every word to that song. That's really been the thing where the last couple of years I've, even more so than the Pink Hats or any sort of that stuff, I've been like, you know what? Fenway Park might not be for me anymore if it's for people that are jamming along to this terrible song. Song.
We can certainly get into how corporatized it is, but right. I don't know if that's
But that's my thing is it's like they play music hey, people will love this, and the reality is that a lot of people, they don't love that. And when you play it, it's like, yeah, I know you think that you're attracting such and such audience, but you're also alienating other people who even now that I know that Mr. Brightside song, I still think it's terrible, and I still hate that they play it. This is awful.
This is gonna be. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that song is a fascinating case because when it came out in 2004, it was kind of like an emo kids anthem, just for sad high school guys who didn't get the girl they like, and then 15 years later, it's transformed into the #1 wedding song, a classic sports.
Yeah, why would you play that song at your wedding?
Well, no, just because people love to sing along to it, right? And everyone gets
no, I know.
But I agree. I mean, okay, well, there's a ton of songs that are played out of context. Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. I mean, but that song or how Seven Nation Army, when it first came out, was a great rock song by a great rock band, and now it's turned into the bros with no shirts on at UNC Duke games doing the acapella version of it, and has made me not like it, even though it is still a great song.
Is that the dun dun da 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 dun dun? Is that?
No, it's
no.
Okay.
Yeah. Now
I will say I hear your point, Ben, about just basically DJs at sporting events. The one concession I will make, and this is very much a niche thing that mostly Dakota I think will appreciate, but when I used to cover the Bruins a lot more, I would actually, instead of going to the media workroom, I would go to the upper halo right when I got to the arena, because before they let any of the fans into the building, the DJ just had on this quiet playlist of very good indie hits. And so it's like LCD Sound System and like bands like that. And I just be sitting there being like, this is really nice. And it's like, you know how goddamn loud it can get inside the Garden. It's like not with the speakers on full tilt. It's just like nice and mellow. And it's just like, indie hits of the 2010s. It's like, yeah, just throw on some, Little Dragon or whatever, and we're good to go.
That happened to Gillette. They play like LCD sound system deep cuts like before warm up start when there's no fans in there, and I'm like, "Why? Can you play this later?"
It must be all the instrumentation, because it's like like he would be playing like Home, which is like 9 minutes long and stuff.
That's
like
the one
that.
they play at
So
Gillette too. They play Gillette all the time.
maybe that's maybe there's
time,
something with that then. Yeah.
I'll just say my final thought on the whole Super Bowl halftime thing is I'm worried that it has been like 4 or 5 years of like R&B or rap, where I worry there's going to be an overcorrection now, and they're going to go, to your point, to bro country or back to rock, which I would love for them to go back to rock, but I don't think they'll do it in a way that's any good. They'll either trot out like Imagine Dragons, who are on the short list of the worst musical act of the 21st century, or they'll trot out Green Day, who haven't been good for like at least 20 years, and it's going to suck. Or they'll trot out like Morgan Wallen, and we'll have to listen to just total trash bro country. So I fear the overcorrection.
I'm not trying to hate on sports DJs just in general. I thought that like the perfect uh, realization of the moment that I've ever heard at a sporting event, as far as the music is concerned, was last year at the women's bean pot at the Garden. Um, it was, it's a lot of like little girls that are there, or like, so it's a lot of girls were there like with their like hockey teams. They're all wearing their like little shirts and stuff, their jerseys and stuff. And during one of the breaks, they played a Taylor Swift song. They played I don't know the names of songs, but it was the one that like, why can't you see? So they were playing that, and then they're playing the song, and then right when the action started, they stopped the music like hard, and like with in a totally otherwise like silent arena, all the little girls, you could hear them go, why can't you see you belong with me? And then like the action starts on the ice, and I was like, that's adorable. Like that's an adorable moment. Like it's the first women's bean pot at the Garden. It was like, and the timing was such a way that like the DJ like had probably had a feeling that was going to happen. So sometimes sports DJs can be good. I'm not just saying they're bad overall.
I have a parting shot that is an admission.
Huge Morgan
Dakota fan? No, absolutely not. I don't do country. I have seen Imagine Dragons live, actually. I saw them at the DCU Center in Worcester in 2014 because I went to see the opener. I went to see the Naked and Famous, who was opening for them, which was kind of a interesting choice for them, but it was a passable concert as far as the Imagine Dragons are concerned. But the Naked and Famous was who I was there for.
I actually watched a Netflix show that I did not like. But the one thing I liked about the one episode or 1.5 episodes I liked was the theme song was really cool. And I was like, this song stinks, but I don't like. So I looked it up on YouTube, and it was an Imagine Dragons. I was like, okay.
The only Naked and Famous song I know, Logan, is I don't know if it was Youngblood or Punching in a Dream that was on like the version of SSX boarding that came out in like 2010.
Yeah, that they were definitely like video game hit makers at that point in time.
Yeah,
they were on like the games that would play like indie records. They were all about that.
That's shameful though that you went to see Imagine Dragons.
I don't regret seeing the Naked and Famous. They're a very good band.
They're not good enough to like also give money to Imagine Dragons though.
Yeah. We might not agree on this.
Yeah, let's can it.
Yeah, let's move on. From behind the microphone to what I'm calling behind the keyboard. This is how we are put a cap on each episode with a question that maybe from our experience, from our time in sports media, has gained us something that it might not be something that the average fan knows. The question I want to put you guys today was, who is a person or people that, in your opinion, based on what you've seen behind the scenes at covering games, press conferences, those sorts of things, is a much better reporter than people realize, or just plain like much better at their jobs than a lot of folks realize?
I've got two quick ones. One, I think he's retired now, is Ken Pautak, who was the Associated Press. He was like a general assignment guy. He did a lot of Red Sox for the AP, but he was like a part-timer who ran like a hardware store on the side and just had like a labor of love. And he would get in there and ask like legitimate questions at every press conference he went to. He wasn't a beat reporter, but he was around often enough. And it was like, sometimes those people don't ask a lot of questions. And he was actually very good about getting stuff that was useful. The other is, I'm decidedly anti-insider, but an insider who I think actually does good original reporting that comes out in written form is Elliot Friedman. If you ever read his 32 Thoughts blog, there's some like deeply reported stories that I'm sure he gets some help with given the nature of his job. But I think a lot of those guys, it's like they don't even write, like Schefter. I don't even think he probably even has access to ESPN CMS, but like Friedman actually posts like stories of length and things like that. So that's something that I think can actually separate and make an insider like that worthwhile.
Yeah, this one was tough for me. A lot came to mind. I'll give a couple quick ones before I get my real one. I mentioned earlier Sox prospects. I think a lot of people would just assume that's either just a podcast or an informational website. In reality, if you read that website, follow Chris Hatfield or Ian Kundal on Twitter, or listen to the podcast, there's a lot of source information in there, especially from the scouting side around the industry. Again, if deep prospect stuff and deep baseball stuff is your thing, I learn a lot listening to that, and those guys do a really good job. Writers in town that I've always sort of admired, especially as I've worked more closely with them. Tom Curran, I think, does a great job. I just appreciate, maybe more so these days, the writers that write either concisely or with a lot of personality and not really formulaic or cookie cutter, which I think I've even fallen into a lot as someone who's done a lot of high volume writing. I think you slip into bad habits or following the same formula. And I think that's probably slipped into a lot of the writers generally. But people like Tom Curran, Kevin DuPont, who I think are pros and still put a lot of personality in their writing, I really appreciate. But the one I ultimately wanted to choose, Bob Sochi. Bob Sochi, the voice of the Patriots. And I choose him because he does not have to go to Gillette as often as he does. He is there every day, and he puts in the full hours every day. I don't think he maybe writes once in a while. And not every sort of interview or anything he does down there makes it onto the air. He truly is just there every day on a fact-finding mission to learn, to give himself as much information and knowledge as possible before the broadcast. He asks tons of questions, good questions, and all the media availabilities. Talks to a lot of guys in the locker room. Just an all-around good guy and professional. Great to shoot the breeze with in the media room. So just being around the Patriots a lot, I've gained a lot of respect for Bob Sochi because he puts a ton of work into that job when, in reality, he probably could just show up on Sundays and maybe show up once a week during the week, but he puts in full time and puts a ton of effort into it. So I think he does a great job.
It's interesting. I didn't know that about those guys.
Yeah.
So I have a couple quick ones. So two of whom people might not have ever heard of. Dakota, I know you've heard me talk before about Steve Bulpett. When I was on the Celtics beat, he was always a guy that, the rest of us would be trying to chase this or that thing that's reportedly connected to them making a move or whatever. But he would always be, his article or his reporting would always be the one that's like, oh, that's the facts. He would be the one who knew the deals at all times. And that's from the Boston end. from the Philly end, there's a guy named Mike Jensen, who he covers the Big Five, he covered. I don't know if he still does so, in Philly, the college basketball, and he does a tremendous job. Even more so when you consider that Big Five basketball in Philly, it's like it's a fraternity in all the best and worst senses of the word. Like it's a big high school, and there's a danger if you're a objective reporter of you piss off one of those coaches or one of those athletic directors, they talk, and all of a sudden and he's done it for decades, as a really honest reporter, does a tremendous job. The guy who was the most kind of influential for me when I was really young, breaking into the game, covering high school sports, was a guy named Ted Solari in Philly. He covered inner city Philly sports. And the thing that I remember is, the games would end, and if it was a big game, you'd have people there from multiple papers. They would all make a beeline for the coach, and he would make beelines for the players. And each one of his game stories was like these little biographies about the players, and it wasn't just like so and so hit a big shot. It was that like so and so was happy that his grandma was able to get there that day to see his big shot because she underwent surgery 2 days ago and he wasn't sure. And like it was just he was a tremendous reporter. I saw him, yell at some people a few times, which I loved. He was once like taking a high school football score over the phone from a freelance reporter who was out in the field, and the guy was like, whoever it was like, yeah, this third touchdown was scored by this guy named Williams. I don't have his first name; it's not on the roster. And he was like, well, is the kid still? Has the bus left yet? And the guy goes, well, no. He goes, well, get on the fucking bus and ask what the kid's first name was. And he slammed the phone. It was awesome. But the one that people definitely will know who they are, and I can't speak to the last 20-something years, but when I freelanced and interned at the Philadelphia Inquirer, I sat at supposedly Stephen A's desk. He was never there. We just lost Logan. Logan, you still with us? Okay, maybe he had dad jobs.
My guess is dad responsibility.
Yeah. And Stephen A was never there, so there was never I never crossed paths with him. If anything, one time a copy editor pulled me aside and they were copy editing his column, and they were just like, all right, I'm gonna go through this, never do any of these things, and they were just like they were just deleting exclamation points and like semicolons and they were just like, don't do any of this stuff. But I will say that the couple of times I was in press conferences with him at events, he did, and again, this is the early 2000s. I don't have no idea if he still puts in this, but he asked incredibly insightful questions. He would just, Stephen A. Smith here from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Larry, I just need to ask you about, and he would obviously it's performative because he's Stephen A, but he would end up asking some pretty insightful questions, and he got good columns out of it as a result. So I hear now people complain about him always just this like blowhard talking head guy. He at one point in time, and maybe even still to this day, I think he was a good reporter. He was good at framing questions and then framing his columns based on those questions.
Yeah, but is he a good presidential candidate?
Oh, well, now we're delving into new territory.
No, I think that is the thing that a lot of people, just maybe you gain a new appreciation for when you're close to it, is the art of asking questions, or or trying to. There's a whole game to it, right? And I think especially when Belichick was around, I got more comfortable and sort of found my groove with it when he was towards the end. But a guy I always admired for the way he would ask questions to Bill is Phil Perry. I mean, he would just, because Belichick would do his thing, right, and not answer, or give a disingenuous thing, and a lot of people just sort of take it, and then the next question gets asked, and Phil would just keep probing and and twisting the knife, and in a way like, so score doesn't matter then, or so and he would just and you could tell Bill would get pissed off, but Phil would do it to such a point where Bill didn't really have an option but to answer the question, and he was just he was so persistent in those moments, that I always appreciated how he was able to get that stuff out of Belichick, which is tough. I mean, he was obviously the hardest person to ask questions to.
Certainly. All right, I think we can put a pin in it there. Dakota, I appreciate you sticking with us till the very end.
I got nothing else to do.
That's a quality that is in short supply nowadays, especially from 1/3 of our staff here. But my name is Ben. This has been Dakota. Logan, we don't know. We'll send out we'll send out a welfare check to his town's police officers, make sure everything is okay. But this has been the NPC Sports Podcast. Join us next week. We'll be streaming again. We'll be hitting all the other hot button topics in the world of Boston sports.